August 24th, 1944. Dassault Bay, Philippine Islands. The periscope broke the surface just enough for Commander Samuel Dealey to scan the waters ahead. Through the circular lens, he could see what his sonar operator had already reported: a Japanese escort frigate, designation CD-22, churning toward them at attack speed. The enemy captain knew exactly where USS Harder lurked beneath these shallow waters. This would be Dealey's final calculation, the last time he would size up an approaching enemy warship and make the decision that had earned him recognition throughout the Pacific submarine fleet as the destroyer killer. 3 torpedoes away. Down the throat. The gambit that had transformed American submarines from hunted prey into destroyer killers. Minutes later, 15 depth charges exploded in rapid succession. The USS Hake, operating nearby, heard every detonation. Then silence. USS Harder, submarine serial number 257, and her crew of 79 men disappeared from history. Yet in that disappearance lay the culmination of a tactical revolution that had begun just 14 months earlier, when a submarine commander decided that the rules about avoiding Japanese destroyers were written by men who had never faced what he was about to face. The story of how Samuel Dealey transformed American submarine doctrine doesn't begin with heroics. It begins with failure, mechanical breakdown, and a naval culture that had spent 2 decades training submariners to be scouts rather than warriors. To understand why Dealey's tactics represented such a radical departure, you must first understand what American submarines were supposed to do before Pearl Harbor, and why those assumptions proved catastrophically wrong when war arrived. In 1930, when Ensign Samuel David Dealey graduated from the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, submarine doctrine throughout the U.S. Navy emphasized caution above all else. Pre-war doctrine specified that submarines existed primarily to support the surface fleet through reconnaissance and attacks on large enemy warships. Merchant vessels were secondary targets, constrained by prize rules established in the London Naval Treaty. During fleet exercises, submarine commanders earned recognition for keeping their boats clean and avoiding detection, not for tactical innovation. Night exercises were banned entirely. If a referee spotted a periscope breaking the surface during drills, the commanding officer could be relieved immediately. Young submarine officers learned to hide, to observe, and to survive. Attack tactics stressed submerged firing from long distances, deliberately reducing success chances in exchange for submarine preservation. Risk aversion was institutionalized. Dealey fit this culture during his early career. Born September 13, 1906 in Dallas, Texas, he graduated from Annapolis in June 1930 and served on the battleship USS Nevada before requesting transfer to submarine school in New London, Connecticut in 1934. His first commanding officer described him as quiet, not colourful. That decorousness aligned perfectly with 1930s submarine culture. Dealey served on several submarines, including S-34, S-24, Nautilus, and Bass, without particular distinction. In spring 1940, he left submarine service temporarily to become executive officer of the destroyer USS Reuben James under Captain H. L. Edwards, called Tex, a close friend from Annapolis. The destroyer was assigned to neutrality patrol in the Gulf of Mexico, working alongside British warships to intercept German U-boats. Then came October 31st, 1941. A German U-boat sent the Reuben James to the bottom with Tex Edwards and all but 45 of its 160-man crew. The loss devastated Dealey. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor 5 weeks later, Samuel Dealey's purpose crystallized: get into the war. He requested immediate transfer back to submarine service and received command of USS-20, an aging test-bed vessel. From that moment forward, he drove his crew relentlessly, preparing for combat with unprecedented intensity. After Pearl Harbor, American submarine commanders in the Pacific quickly realized their peacetime culture of caution had to change. Within 5 hours of the Pearl Harbor attack, Navy headquarters issued orders for unrestricted warfare on all Japanese shipping. This represented a completely new mission for American submariners. Despite decades focusing on Japan as the potential enemy, US naval doctrine had never envisioned using submarines to blockade Japan. Doctrine began evolving rapidly as skippers returned from combat and filed detailed war patrol reports. These 50 to 60-page accounts became the foundation for a new operational approach emphasizing aggression. Senior commanders added assessments encouraging or discouraging particular methods. Over time, accumulated experience coalesced into formal doctrine emphasizing offensive action. But the transformation proved painful. During 1942, nearly 30% of submarine commanding officers lost their commands for insufficient aggression or inability to achieve results. The Navy desperately searched for combat-ready replacements with both technical skill and psychological capacity to take calculated risks under fire. Samuel Dealey emerged as exactly that kind of candidate. In September 1942, the Navy gave him command of USS Harder, a brand-new Gato-class submarine just completing construction at Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut. USS Harder, hull number SS-257, was commissioned on December 2, 1942, less than 1 year after Pearl Harbor. The Gato class represented cutting-edge American submarine technology. At 311 feet long with a beam of 27 feet, these boats displaced 1,525 tons surfaced and 2,424 tons submerged. 4 diesel engines provided surface propulsion and charged batteries that powered electric motors for underwater operations. Top speed reached 20.5 knots surfaced, dropping to 9 knots submerged. The boats could dive to a test depth of 300 feet, though experienced commanders sometimes exceeded that in emergencies. Armament consisted of 10 21-inch torpedo tubes carrying 24 torpedoes total, plus a 4-inch deck gun. Harder suffered from a critical flaw shared by 11 other Gato-class boats, troublesome Hooven-Owens-Rentschler diesel engines licensed from German manufacturer Maschinenfabrik Augsburg-Nürnberg in the 1930s. The American adaptation proved chronically unreliable, and this mechanical weakness would plague Harder throughout her service. Despite engine problems, Dealey took his new command through shakedown exercises off the East Coast. After surviving a blue-on-blue attack by a Navy patrol bomber in the Caribbean, he brought his boat to the Pacific in spring 1943, arriving at Pearl Harbor ready for combat operations. On June 7, 1943, USS Harder departed Pearl Harbor on her first war patrol, bound for the coast of southern Honshu, Japan. Late on the night of June 21st, Harder detected a 2-ship enemy convoy. Dealey positioned for attack using radar for surface approach and launched 4 torpedoes. Then everything went wrong. An aggressive enemy escort detected Harder's attack and immediately counterattacked. Depth charges began exploding as Dealey ordered emergency deep dive. Harder plunged down hard, her hull groaning under pressure. Then came the sickening crunch of impact. The submarine had been driven so deep that she crashed nose first into the muddy bottom off the Japanese coast. For agonizing minutes, Harder sat trapped while depth charges continued exploding above. Finally, Dealey managed to back the submarine out and slip away. It was an inauspicious beginning. The encounter revealed critical realities about submarine warfare in 1943. Japanese escorts were aggressive and skilled at anti-submarine warfare. The ocean floor was often shallower than American charts indicated. Most importantly, destroyers and escorts represented a mortal threat that most submarine commanders tried desperately to avoid. Conventional wisdom held that submarines should evade destroyers whenever possible. The fast, maneuverable warships equipped with depth charges and sonar represented the submarine's natural predator. Attacking a destroyer was considered extraordinarily risky, attempted only when absolutely necessary or when conditions strongly favoured the submarine. But Samuel Dealey drew different conclusions from that first harrowing encounter. He had faced a destroyer at its most dangerous, yet Harder had survived and remained operational. 2 nights later, on June 23rd, Dealey achieved his first real success, torpedoing the Japanese seaplane tender Sagara Maru, a 7,000-ton vessel that had to be beached and was later destroyed. Over the next 4 days, Dealey attempted 7 more attacks on 3 different convoys. Post-war analysis would credit him with possible damage to only 1 additional ship during these attempts. Harder returned to Midway Island on July 7, 1943, with one of her 4 diesel engines completely broken down. After hasty repairs and loading spare engine parts, Harder returned to sea for her second war patrol in late August, heading once more for Honshu. This patrol would prove dramatically different. In just 14 days, Harder made 9 separate attacks. Post-war accounting credited Dealey with sinking 5 enemy ships totaling 15,000 tons. The submarine attacked and sank Koyo Maru on September 9th, running past an escort ship at just 1,200 yards without detection. 2 days later, she sank the cargo ship Yoko Maru. On September 13th, Harder was forced deep by enemy aircraft. What followed tested both submarine and crew to their limits. Japanese escorts kept Harder pinned down with a severe depth charge attack lasting over 2 days, nearly exhausting the boat's batteries. The crew endured repeated explosions, wondering with each detonation whether it would rupture their hull. Temperature and carbon dioxide levels climbed as batteries drained. Men fought against fear and claustrophobia, maintaining silence to avoid giving away their position. Finally, Dealey found a thermal layer in the water that confused Japanese sonar and escaped. On September 19th, a torpedo sent Kachisan Maru to the bottom. On September 23rd, off Nagoya Bay, she sank the 4,500-ton freighter Koa Maru and the 5,800-ton tanker Daishin Maru. With torpedoes expended, Harder turned homeward, arriving at Pearl Harbor on October 8, 1943. The second patrol established Dealey's reputation for resolute action. 5 confirmed sinks in 14 days represented outstanding performance. More significantly, Dealey had survived a sustained depth charge attack that would have broken many commanders psychologically. He had demonstrated the resilience to endure extreme pressure and continue hunting. At the end of October 1943, Commander Submarines Pacific, Vice Admiral Charles Lockwood, ordered Harder to join USS Snook and USS Pargo in forming a coordinated attack group known as a Wolf Pack for operations around the Mariana Islands. The 3 submarines departed on October 30th with orders to attack Japanese shipping in preparation for the American invasion of Tarawa. Early Wolfpack operations suffered from communication challenges. After collaborating with Pargo in attacking an enemy freighter on November 12th with unclear results, Dealey found himself operating independently. On November 19th, Harder detected a convoy of 3 large Japanese freighters with escorts north of the Marianas. Dealey positioned for attack and fired 10 torpedoes, scoring hits on 2 targets. Udo Maru sank. As depth charges began falling, Dealey pressed the attack, firing 2 more torpedoes that finished Hoko Maru. Rather than withdrawing, Harder climbed to periscope depth after nightfall to hunt the 3rd merchant ship, the 6,000-ton Nikko Maru. The Japanese ship's crew kept her afloat through damage control efforts, even as Dealey fired multiple additional torpedoes. Rough weather the next day finally sent the vessel to the bottom. Harder returned to Pearl Harbor on November 30th and then sailed to Mare Island Naval Shipyard for overhaul. Returning to action in the Pacific, Harder reached Pearl Harbor on February 27, 1944, and departed on her 4th war patrol on March 16th in company with USS Seahorse. The submarines were assigned lifeguard duty, rescuing downed aviators during American airstrikes. On April 1, 1944, during airstrikes against Woollei in the Caroline Islands, Harder received word of an injured pilot awaiting rescue from the beach of a small enemy-held island west of Woollei. Protected by air cover, Dealey nosed harder against a reef and maintained position with both propellers while sending a boat ashore through breaking surf. Despite Japanese snipers firing from the beach, the rescue succeeded, and pilot ensign John R. Galvin was brought aboard safely. But the patrol's most significant moment came 12 days later and would revolutionize American submarine warfare against destroyers. On April 13th, an enemy plane spotted Harder north of the Western Caroline Islands and reported her position to the patrolling Japanese destroyer Ikazuchi. The destroyer captain immediately raced toward the submarine, closing to attack range. This was exactly the situation that conventional doctrine said submarines should avoid. A destroyer had detected Harder's position and was charging in for the kill. Standard procedure called for crash diving to maximum depth and attempting to evade. Instead, Dealey did something that would change submarine warfare in the Pacific. He turned directly toward the onrushing destroyer. This decision requires understanding what became known as the down-the-throat shot, a tactic so counterintuitive that few submarine commanders had attempted it. The tactical logic was based on a critical observation about destroyer behavior. When a destroyer charged at a submarine at attack speed, it presented its narrowest profile, but also committed to a predictable course. The destroyer captain had to maintain heading to close the distance and deploy depth charges. This brief window of predictability created an opportunity for a submarine commander with precise timing. By firing multiple torpedoes in a tight spread with slight angular separation, perhaps 1 or 2 degrees apart, a submarine skipper could send a cluster of weapons directly at the charging destroyer. By the time lookouts aboard the target spotted the torpedo wakes streaking toward them, the range was too close for effective evasive maneuvers. The destroyer's own speed and commitment to attack course sealed its fate. The tactic worked best in limited visibility or at close range when enemy lookouts had minimal time to react. But it required perfect timing, accurate firing solutions, and above all, the psychological capacity to maintain course toward an approaching destroyer, rather than diving away from it. Most submarine commanders found that last requirement impossible. Everything in their training screamed to dive, to evade, to hide. As Ikazuchi closed to within 900 yards, Dealey fired a spread of 4 torpedoes directly at the charging warship. 5 minutes later, Ikazuchi disappeared beneath the waves, her hull torn apart by multiple torpedo hits. Dealey's terse report to headquarters became instantly famous throughout the submarine service. Expended 4 torpedoes and 1 Jap destroyer. The action represented a fundamental break with submarine doctrine. Dealey had not merely defended against a destroyer attack. He had deliberately engaged a destroyer using a method that would soon spread throughout the Pacific submarine fleet. 4 days after sinking Ikazuchi, Harder sank the 7,000-ton merchant ship Matsue Maru and damaged an escort. Then, adding to enemy losses, she returned to Waliai and surfaced on April 20th to deliver shore bombardment under cover of a rain squall. The 4th patrol ended at Fremantle Submarine Base in Western Australia on May 3, 1944. Dealey had sunk a destroyer using a revolutionary approach, rescued a downed pilot under fire, sunk a merchant ship, damaged an escort, and bombarded an enemy garrison. But greater achievements and greater dangers lay immediately ahead. In April 1944, American strategic planners made a critical decision that would shape USS Harder's 5th War Patrol. Ultra-code-breaking intelligence had revealed that the Imperial Japanese Navy had lost numerous destroyers in the battles around the Solomon Islands. These losses were creating an acute shortage of escort vessels, just as Japan desperately needed them for convoy protection and fleet screening. Destroyers, once considered secondary targets for American submarines, were elevated in priority. A new directive went out from Commander Submarines Pacific: sink destroyers. Target them deliberately. Every Japanese destroyer on the bottom was one less escort for their convoys, one less screen for their fleet carriers, one less anti-submarine platform hunting American submarines. With this strategic shift in mind, Commander Dealey lobbied successfully for a specific patrol area, the waters around the Japanese fleet anchorage at Tawi-Tawi, off the northeast coast of Borneo. The reasoning was straightforward. Tawi-Tawi sat near the Borneo oil fields, allowing Japanese warships to refuel without making the increasingly dangerous journey back to home waters. American submarines had cut Japanese oil supply lines so effectively that the fleet had to stay close to its fuel source. Ultra-intelligence indicated the Japanese were concentrating significant naval forces at Tawi-Tawi, including destroyers screening the fleet anchorage. It was a target-rich environment for a submarine commander willing to hunt the hunters. On May 26, 1944, USS Harder departed Fremantle with USS Redfin and headed for the Celebes Sea. The Fifth War Patrol would become the most celebrated submarine operation of World War II. But the patrol's first mission involved special operations, infiltrating through heavily patrolled straits to pick up Australian commandos and Allied intelligence operatives from the coast of Borneo. On the night of June 6, 1944, Harder entered the Sibutu Passage between Tawi-Tawi and northern Borneo. The passage was narrow, heavily patrolled, and about as dangerous as anywhere in the Pacific for a submarine. At 19:30 hours, Dealey's radar detected a convoy of 3 tankers escorted by 2 destroyers. He gave chase on the surface, using Harder's superior surface speed to maneuver into attack position. But the bright moon illuminated the submarine, and the destroyer Minatsuki spotted Harder and turned to attack. Dealey submerged and at 21:59 hours, from a range of 1,100 yards, fired 3 torpedoes directly at the approaching destroyer. 2 torpedoes struck home. The destroyer exploded and sank within 5 minutes. Of her crew, only 45 survived. At 22:17 hours, barely 20 minutes later, Harder's radar detected a second destroyer rapidly closing from 14,000 yards. Again, conventional wisdom dictated running. Dealey did the opposite. He turned toward the enemy and closed on the approaching destroyer, waiting until the range decreased to just 1,250 yards before firing all 6 bow tubes at 22:42 hours. This time, the enemy captain proved skillful. He avoided all 6 torpedoes, forcing Harder to dive deep to 400 feet and rig for depth charges. Sea conditions and a thermal layer allowed Harder to escape the counterattack that lasted until midnight. The engagement demonstrated that the tactic worked best in limited visibility, or when the destroyer was fully committed to attack. In good visibility at longer ranges, skilled enemy captains could evade. Still, Harder had a mission to complete. On the night of June 7th, at 1940 hours, Dealey surfaced and proceeded toward the Borneo coastline. The submarine came to rest with her hull scraping the bottom only 6,000 yards off the beach. Australian commandos Major William T. Jenkins and Sergeant Stanley W. Dodds assembled 2 folding canoes and paddled toward shore guided by Harder's radar via walkie-talkie. Just over 2 hours later, they retrieved 6 members of the Australian Special Reconnaissance Department's Z Unit and returned at 01:30 hours on June 8th. That evening, June 8th, as Harder proceeded back through the Sibutu Passage, lookouts spotted 2 enemy destroyers patrolling the narrowest part of the passage, just 6 miles from the fleet anchorage. The destroyers were running parallel courses, patrolling in line abreast to maximize their sonar coverage. Dealey submerged and made an undetected approach. At a range of 1,000 yards, he fired 4 torpedoes at the overlapping targets. The second and third torpedoes blasted the destroyer Tanikaze. She sank almost immediately, her boilers erupting in a terrific explosion that could be felt throughout Harder. The fourth torpedo struck what appeared to be the second destroyer with a blinding flash. Within minutes, both ships had disappeared beneath the surface. Soon afterward, depth charge attacks began as enemy aircraft arrived. Dealey took Harder deep and set course south of Tawi-Tawi for reconnaissance of the main anchorage. Post-war Japanese records confirmed the sinking of Tanikaze. American accounts reported observing the explosion and rapid disappearance of what appeared to be a second destroyer, though post-war records could not definitively confirm this second target. In just 2 days, Harder had sunk at least 2 destroyers confirmed, possibly a third, rescued Allied commandos, and penetrated the heavily defended approaches to the Japanese fleet's main anchorage. But the patrol was far from over. On the afternoon of June 10, 1944, Harder sighted a large Japanese task force, 3 battleships, 4 cruisers, and screening destroyers. It was elements of the Japanese mobile fleet, Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's striking force assembled for Operation Eigo, the planned decisive battle against American forces in the Philippine Sea. An overhead patrol aircraft spotted Harder at periscope depth and immediately called in the escorts. A screening destroyer peeled away from the formation and came charging toward Harder at 35 knots. The destroyer captain intended to force the submarine down, mark her position with depth charges, and allow the task force to escape while other escorts finished the kill. The range closed rapidly. 1,500 yards, 1,400, 1,300. At 1,500 yards, Dealey fired 3 torpedoes and ordered crash dive. The firing solution had to be instantaneous. Too early and the torpedoes would pass ahead of the destroyer. Too late and the destroyer would be too close for the torpedoes to arm properly. Dealey's timing was flawless. As Harder dove, maintaining her course even as she descended, the torpedoes sped toward their target. In the 55 seconds it took for the first torpedo to reach the destroyer, Harder travelled to a position almost directly beneath her target. The destroyer exploded directly above Harder. The submarine was heeled over by concussion from the detonating target. Shock waves slammed through the hull. Light bulbs shattered. Men were thrown against bulkheads. Dealey had passed so close beneath the exploding destroyer that fragments of the enemy ship rained down on Harder's hull. The crew heard the unmistakable sounds of a warship breaking apart above them. Bulkheads tearing, machinery crashing, the hull sections separating. For hours afterward, Japanese escorts hunted Harder with depth charges, but Dealey had already alerted Pearl Harbor to the enemy fleet's position. His contact report would prove strategically crucial in the coming days. When Harder finally surfaced that night to charge batteries, Dealey and his crew were physically and mentally exhausted. The patrol report would later note that fatigue of all hands approached a dangerous stage several times. On June 11th, Harder reconnoitred the Tawi-Tawi anchorage and sighted additional enemy cruisers and destroyers assembled for Operation Eigo. At 1600 hours, Dealey headed for open sea, and that night transmitted his observations to Admiral Raymond Spruance's Fifth Fleet. The intelligence proved vitally important for American forces preparing for what would become the Battle of the Philippine Sea. During this remarkable 5-day period from June 6th to June 10th, USS Harder had engaged multiple enemy destroyers with confirmed sinking of at least 3, possibly more. Dealey would later be awarded the Medal of Honor for this patrol. The citation credited him with sinking 5 destroyers in 5 short-range torpedo attacks, though post-war accounting efforts faced challenges in definitively confirming all Japanese losses due to incomplete or destroyed enemy records. Multiple sources, including American observation, Japanese reports, and survivor accounts, supported claims of multiple destroyer sinkings during this period. The patrol's impact extended far beyond individual ship sinkings. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, commander of the Japanese Combined Fleet, read the mounting contact reports with growing alarm. Multiple destroyers had been sunk in quick succession. The aggressive contact reports suggested submarines had penetrated the Tawi-Tawi defensive perimeter. The loss of several destroyers convinced Toyoda that Tawi-Tawi was no longer secure as an anchorage. On June 13, 1944, Toyoda ordered Admiral Ozawa's mobile fleet to depart Tawi-Tawi immediately, a full day ahead of schedule. This premature departure disrupted Japanese battle plans for Operation Eigo. The carriers left before final preparations were complete. Coordination with land-based aircraft suffered. Most critically, Ozawa's force had to slow down in the Philippine Sea to allow trailing units to catch up, costing valuable positioning time before the coming engagement. When the Battle of the Philippine Sea erupted on June 19th and 20th, 1944, American forces achieved overwhelming victory. U.S. carrier aircraft and anti-aircraft fire destroyed nearly 480 Japanese aircraft in what American pilots called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. American submarines sank 2 Japanese fleet carriers. USS Albacore torpedoed Taiho, and USS Kavala sank Shokaku. Carrier aircraft destroyed Hiyo. The Japanese carrier air arm, already weakened by previous losses, was effectively destroyed as an offensive force. The battle eliminated Japan's ability to conduct large-scale carrier operations for the remainder of the war. USS Harder's operations around Tawi-Tawi belonged among the contributing factors to American victory. Toyoda's decision to withdraw the fleet prematurely, disrupting Japanese battle plans and forcing Ozawa to delay his carriers, stemmed in part from the submarine operations that had sunk multiple destroyers and created the perception of a submarine cordon around the anchorage. One submarine's persistent operations had influenced fleet movements and contributed to the decisive defeat of Japanese naval aviation. Harder steamed to Darwin, Australia, arriving on June 21, 1944, for additional torpedoes. After patrolling the Flores Sea, she ended the patrol at Darwin on July 3rd. General Douglas MacArthur personally presented Dealey with the Distinguished Service Cross, the Army's second-highest valor decoration. Dealey was awarded the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, as commanding officer of the USS Harder during her 5th war patrol in Japanese-controlled waters." This remarkable record of 5 vital Japanese destroyers sunk in 5 short-range torpedo attacks attests the valiant fighting spirit of Commander Dealey and his indomitable command. Harder also received the Presidential Unit Citation, awarded to the entire crew for extraordinary heroism in combat. The submarine had earned the motto that would define her legacy, "Hit 'em harder." On August 5, 1944, Harder departed Fremantle for her 6th and final war patrol, leading a 3-submarine wolf pack that included USS Haddo, commanded by Chester Nimitz Jr., son of the Pacific Fleet commander, and USS Hake under Frank Haler. Their objective was destruction of Japanese shipping off the west coast of the Philippines south of the Luzon Strait. Ultra-intelligence reported that Japanese convoy H-171 had taken refuge in Palawan Bay in northern Mindoro. Harder and Haddo joined 3 other submarines already in the area, with Dealey assuming tactical command as senior officer present afloat. On August 21st, when the enemy convoy sorted from Palawan Bay at 05:45 hours, the coordinated submarine attack that followed destroyed 4 Japanese merchant ships totaling 22,400 tons. The next day, August 22nd, Harder and Haddo attacked and sank the escort ships Matsuwa and Hiburi, Kaiboken-class coastal defense vessels that served convoy escort functions. That evening, Haki rejoined the wolf pack. At dawn on August 23rd, Haddo attacked and fatally damaged the destroyer Asakaze off Cape Bolinao. With her torpedoes expended, Haddo departed to replenish at Biak, leaving Harder and Huck to continue hunting in the dangerous waters off Luzon. Before dawn on August 24, 1944, Hake's radar detected 2 enemy vessels emerging from Dassel Bay, an old destroyer and escort frigate CD-22. The old destroyer turned back into the bay, but CD-22 continued outward on patrol. Commander Frank Haler in Hake began an approach but didn't like the tactical setup and started to break off. As he manoeuvred away, he spotted Harder's periscope at 06:47 hours. Both submarines were now operating in the same confined area, and CD-22's sonar likely detected at least one of them. At 07:10 hours, Haler believed the escort ship had 2 targets and appeared somewhat confused about which to engage, The situation was fluid, complex, dangerous. At 07:28 hours, Haler and his crew heard 15 rapid depth charges explode in quick succession. Harder's last action was almost certainly an engagement with CD-22. Dealey had employed the approach that had succeeded on previous patrols. He had positioned his submarine, calculated the firing solution, and launched his torpedoes. But this time, the torpedoes missed their target. 2 went wide to port, the third wide to starboard. Whether Dealey miscalculated the range, whether CD-22's captain made an unexpected maneuver at the critical moment, whether some malfunction affected the torpedo spread, will never be known. What is certain is that CD-22 survived the attack and immediately counterattacked with 15 depth charges in a concentrated pattern. The charges detonated at Harder's depth. The explosions crushed the submarine's pressure hull. USS Harder, submarine number 257, sank with all 79 men aboard. Commander Samuel Dealey died at age 37, having commanded Harder for all 6 of her war patrols. The news of Harder's loss with all hands shocked the American submarine force. Some believed Dealey had simply exhausted his fortune after so many dangerous encounters. Others thought he had crossed an imperceptible line between calculated boldness and excessive risk-taking. The debate would continue for decades among submarine veterans and historians. Had the tactic that worked so well against fleet destroyers proven less effective against a smaller, more maneuverable escort vessel? Had exhaustion from continuous combat operations degraded judgment or timing? Or had CD-22's captain simply executed the right defensive maneuver at the critical moment? The answer probably combined all these factors. The direct engagement tactic was never guaranteed to succeed. It required optimal conditions, precise timing, and favourable circumstances. Dealey had succeeded multiple times through a combination of skill and fortune. On August 24, 1944, those factors did not align. But focusing only on Harder's loss misses the larger significance of what Samuel Dealey accomplished in 21 months of command. When Dealey assumed command of Harder in December 1942, American submarine doctrine emphasized avoiding Japanese destroyers. Destroyers were predators, submarines were prey. The standard response to a charging destroyer was crash dive and evade at maximum depth. Dealey challenged this assumption not through theoretical analysis, but through combat action. He recognized that destroyers committed to attack ran on predictable courses for critical seconds. Their own aggression created a brief window of vulnerability. A submarine commander with steady nerves and precise timing could exploit that window by firing torpedoes directly at the charging destroyer before diving beneath it. Between April and June 1944, Dealey sank multiple Japanese destroyers using this method, fundamentally changing how submarine commanders throughout the Pacific Fleet approached destroyer encounters. Other submarines began adopting similar approaches. The psychological impact was profound on both sides. Japanese destroyer captains, previously confident hunters of submarines, now faced the possibility that their prey might attack rather than flee. Aggressive pursuit of submarines became more cautious, less effective, reducing the destroyer's advantage in anti-submarine warfare. Meanwhile, American submarine commanders gained confidence that destroyers could be engaged and defeated rather than merely evaded. The strategic impact extended beyond individual ship sinkings. When Dealey's operations around Tawi-Tawi convinced Admiral Toyoda to withdraw the Japanese fleet prematurely, disrupting Operation Ago and contributing to American victory at the Battle of the Philippine Sea, a single submarine's persistent operations had influenced fleet-level outcomes. This was submarine warfare elevated to strategic effect. During her 6 war patrols, Harder sank 16 enemy ships totaling 54,002 tons, according to post-war accounting. This made Dealey the 5th highest-scoring American submarine commander of the war. Post-war analysis credited Harder with sinking 4 confirmed fleet destroyers plus 2 Kaibokan coastal defense ships, representing the most enemy warships sunk by any American submarine. 6 battle stars and the Presidential Unit Citation recognized Harder's combat achievements across all 6 patrols. But statistics don't fully capture the tactical revolution. Before Dealey, submarines avoided destroyers whenever possible. After Dealey, submarines could hunt them. The direct engagement approach became standard doctrine taught to submarine commanders throughout Commander Submarines Pacific. The method spread through shared patrol reports and tactical discussions. Other commanders executed successful attacks throughout the war's final year. Japanese destroyer forces never fully recovered from the mounting losses inflicted by American submarines in 1944 and 1945. American submarines destroyed 1,314 enemy ships, totaling 5.3 million tons of shipping, representing 55% of all Japanese ships lost during the war. Submarines strangled Japan's war economy by severing supply lines between the home islands and resource areas. Submarines hunted and sank Japanese warships, including carriers, battleships, and cruisers. Submarines conducted reconnaissance, rescued downed pilots, inserted special operations forces, and gathered intelligence. Admiral William Halsey, commander of the Third Fleet, later reflected on the Pacific War's decisive weapons and said, "If I had to give credit to the instruments and machines that won us the war in the Pacific, I would rank them in this order: submarines first, radar second, planes third, bulldozers fourth." American submarines earned that recognition through unwavering operations pioneered by commanders like Samuel Dealey. The silent service transformed from cautious scouts into an offensive force that Japanese shipping could neither avoid nor adequately defend against. In May 2024, 80 years after Harder's loss, the Lost 52 project announced discovery of the submarine's wreck in the South China Sea near Luzon, at a depth exceeding 3,000 feet. Imagery showed the hull relatively intact, except for depth charge damage aft of the conning tower, where CD-22's attack struck. The tactical legacy extends beyond any single submarine or commander. The method Dealey pioneered demonstrated that submarines didn't have to be passive targets waiting for the right moment to flee from destroyers. Submarines could engage directly when conditions favoured such action. This expansion of tactical options represented Dealey's lasting contribution to submarine warfare. He didn't eliminate the destroyer threat or make submarine operations safe, but he demonstrated that resolute action could succeed, that direct engagement offered real possibilities, that submarines possessed capabilities beyond those envisioned in pre-war doctrine. Japanese destroyer forces in the Pacific operated under increasing caution in 1944 and 1945. Submarine commanders understood that American submarines might attack rather than evade. Charging a detected submarine carried risks beyond the traditional anti-submarine warfare scenario. This psychological shift degraded destroyer effectiveness even when individual encounters didn't result in combat. The mere possibility that a submarine might counterattack changed destroyer behavior patterns. American submarines gained freedom of action as Japanese destroyers became more cautious in their pursuit. Convoys traveled with fewer escorts because destroyer losses mounted faster than replacements could be built. Fleet operations suffered from inadequate screening. The cumulative effect of persistent American submarine operations, including the focused targeting of destroyers that Dealey exemplified, weakened Japanese naval capabilities across multiple dimensions. Samuel Dealey commanded USS Harder for 6 war patrols spanning 21 months. He sank 16 enemy ships and engaged multiple destroyers using a method that revolutionized submarine warfare. He earned America's highest military decorations, including the Medal of Honor. He influenced major fleet operations through intelligence gathering and enemy disruption. He changed how submarine warfare was conducted in the Pacific. On August 24, 1944, at age 37, he died attempting one final attack when the approach that had worked before did not succeed. USS Harder rests 3,000 feet beneath the Philippine Sea, testament to both achievement and sacrifice. Her crew lies alongside the submarine they made famous through 6 war patrols of relentless combat operations. Their legacy lives in the tactical doctrine that spread throughout the submarine service and the unwavering spirit that helped strangle Japanese naval power and contribute to Allied victory in the Pacific. That's how destroyer-killer Dealey's head-on attacks transformed US submarine warfare, through combat innovation that validated a new approach, spread through shared experience, and influenced submarine operations throughout the Pacific for the remainder of the war. The revolution happened through repeated success against enemy destroyers, changing both tactical doctrine and the psychological balance between submarines and their most dangerous opponent.